The unexpected arrival. The twin suns of Viridian 7 were setting in brilliant shades of crimson and gold when Jake Morrison heard the first rumble of thunder. He looked up from his workbench, where he'd been repairing a damaged power cell, and frowned at the darkening sky. Storm season had arrived early this year. Beside him, Titan raised his massive head. The Doberman's ears perked forward, alert and focused on something Jake couldn't yet perceive. After 8 years together, 3 of them in active combat zones and 5 in peaceful retirement, Jake had learned to trust his dog's instincts without question. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked, setting down his tools. Titan's low growl was his only answer. Living alone on the frontier wasn't for everyone. Viridian 7 sat at the edge of explored space, a world of purple grasslands and crystal formations that most settlers found too isolated. But for Jake, a former Terran Defense Force combat engineer who'd seen too much war, isolation was exactly what he needed. Out here, the only battles he fought were against malfunctioning equipment and the occasional dust storm. The rumble came again, but this time it wasn't thunder. The sound was wrong, too metallic, too controlled. Jake's military training kicked in instantly. He moved to the window, peering out into the gathering dusk. A streak of fire cut across the darkening sky, followed by a craft that was clearly in distress. The ship was small, maybe a personal transport, and it was losing altitude fast. Jake watched as it screamed overhead, trailing smoke and sparks, before disappearing behind the ridge that bordered his property. The impact shook the ground beneath his feet. Dust and debris erupted into the air about half a kilometer away. Close? Too close. Titan was on his feet now, his body tense and ready. The Doberman moved toward the door and stopped, looking back at Jake with those intelligent brown eyes. "Yeah, I know," Jake muttered, already reaching for his emergency kit. Someone might need help. He strapped on his utility belt, checked his pulse pistol out of habit, and grabbed a medical kit. As he moved toward the door, Titan suddenly barked sharply and positioned himself directly in Jake's path. "Move, Titan," Jake commanded. The dog didn't budge. Instead, his growl deepened, and his gaze fixed on the door with an intensity that made Jake pause. Before he could process this unusual behavior, a sound from inside his home made him freeze. A soft scraping, like something small moving across his floor. Jake turned slowly, his hand moving to his pistol. 2 small figures huddled in the corner of his storage room, partially hidden behind a stack of supply crates. In the dim light, Jake could make out their unusual appearance. Skin that seemed to shimmer with a crystalline quality, reflecting the fading sunlight in prismatic shadows. Their eyes were enormous and violet, filled with terror. Children. Alien children, but children nonetheless. Jake slowly raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The children clutched each other, their small bodies trembling. They looked identical, twins perhaps, no older than 6 or 7 in human years. They wore matching silver suits that were torn and dirty from their escape. One of them touched a small device at her collar, and a mechanical voice translated her words. "Please, we need help. Our mama is still in the ship." Jake's heart clenched. He knelt down slowly, making himself less threatening. "Where's your ship?" "Behind the big rocks," the other child whispered through her translator. "It crashed. Mama told us to run, to find someone good. She said to hide." "Why did she tell you to run?" Jake asked gently. "Why didn't she come with you?" The first child's violet eyes filled with tears. "She couldn't. She had to stay and lock the data. A bad men we coming." "What bad men?" Before they could answer, Titan's growl intensified. Jake looked at his dog and saw the Doberman's attention fix on the window, on something outside. Moving carefully to avoid alarming the children, Jake approached the window and peered out. Titan's instinct. His property was being surrounded. Jake counted at least 4 figures moving through the purple grass with tactical precision. They wore dark armor that seemed to absorb light, and that carried weapons that he recognized as Korvac's design, pulse rifles capable of stunning or killing depending on the setting. These weren't rescuers. Rescuers didn't move like that, didn't approach with weapons drawn and ready. Jake's mind raced. He moved to his security console, a military-grade system he'd installed more out of habit than necessity. The infrared sensors painted a clearer picture. 6 hostiles, not 4. 2 more were approaching from the rear, cutting off potential escape routes. Professional, organized, dangerous. Titan remained positioned between Jake and the door, his body language screaming danger. The dog had been trained to detect threats during their years of service together, and his instincts had never been wrong. "Good boy," Jake murmured. "Good boy, Titan." He returned to the children, who watched him with those huge violet eyes. "What's your mama's name?" "Dr. Seraphine," the first child answered. "She's a scientist. She worked for the Korvax Syndicate, but she found out about the bad things they were doing." "What kind of bad things?" The second child spoke, her voice small and frightened. "They take children like us. They do experiments to make our brains work faster. It hurts. Mama couldn't let them hurt us anymore." Jake's jaw tightened. He'd heard rumors about the Korvax Syndicate, a powerful corporation that operated in the gray areas of galactic law. They specialized in cognitive enhancement technology, but whispers of unethical practices had followed them for years. "Your mama stole something, didn't she?" Jake asked. "Information about what they were doing?" Both children nodded. "She has proof," the first child said. "She said if we can get it to the right people, they'll stop the Korvax from hurting other children." A sharp knock on the door made everyone jump. Titan's growl became a snarl. "Human inside," a voice called out, mechanical and cold. "We detect life signs. Surrender the fugitives and you will not be harmed." Jake looked at the frightened children, then at Titan, who stood ready to defend them with his life. In that moment, something shifted inside him. He'd retired from the military to escape violence, to find peace. But peace without justice was just comfortable cowardice. "What are your names?" he asked the children softly. "I'm Lyra," said the first child. "And I'm Nova," said the second. Jake smiled at them, trying to project calm confidence. "Lyra, Nova, my name is Jake, and this is Titan. We're going to keep you safe." "Human," the voice outside called again, "this is your final warning. Surrender the subjects, or we will take them by force." Jake moved to his weapons locker, pulling out his old service rifle. It had been years since he'd held it, but the weight felt familiar in his hands. Titan watched him with approval, tail wagging slightly. "You girls need to hide," Jake said. "See that panel in the floor? It leads to a safe room underneath the house. Titan will go with you." "But our mama," Lyra protested. "She's still out there. She's hurt." "I know," Jake said. "I'm going to get her. But first, I need you two somewhere safe." Nova grabbed his hand with her small crystalline fingers. "You promise? You promise to save our mama?" Jake looked into those violet eyes and saw hope mixed with fear. He thought about all the promises he'd made during the war, all the people he couldn't save. But maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. "I promise," he said. The standoff begins. The children reluctantly descended into the safe room, Titan following close behind. The Doberman looked back at Jake once, as if questioning whether this was the right call, but obeyed the command to stay and protect. Jake sealed the panel and quickly assessed his situation. 6 hostile outside, probably more in reserve. He was one man with limited ammunition, and a home that wasn't prepared for a siege. Designed to withstand a serious assault. The tactical part of his brain calculated the odds and didn't like them, but he'd faced worse odds before. He activated his home's external speakers. "This is private property. You're trespassing. Leave now, or I'll defend myself." A different voice responded this time, smoother, more educated. "Mr. Morrison, is it? We have no quarrel with you. We're simply retrieving stolen property and fugitive research subjects. Surrender them and we'll leave peacefully." "Research subjects?" Jake's voice was hard. "You mean children, and they're not property. Their legal status is complicated. The Korvax Syndicate holds full custodial rights under contract. Their guardian has violated that contract and stolen classified data. We have every right to reclaim them." "No court in the galaxy would call what you're doing legal," Jake slapped back. "Perhaps, but we're a long way from any court, aren't we, Mr. Morrison? Out here on the frontier, disputes are settled more directly." Jake moved to a reinforced window, peering out carefully. The figures had spread out, taking cover behind natural formations and his equipment. They were setting up for a siege, not a quick assault. That meant they wanted the children alive and unharmed. That gave him leverage. "I've transmitted a distress signal to Viridian Station," Jake lied smoothly. "Security forces will be here within the hour." There was a pause. We both know that's not true, Mr. Morrison. The nearest enforcement is 3 days away, and they don't respond to frontier disputes. You're alone out here. Be smart. Don't die for someone else's children. But that was the thing about humans, Jake thought. They had this annoying habit of dying for exactly those kind of causes. It was what made them dangerous, what made them unpredictable, what made the galaxy both fear and respect them. Here's my counteroffer, Jake said. You leave now, and I don't start shooting, because I'm a former TDF combat engineer, and I know exactly where I bury the defensive charges around this property. One wrong step, and your team becomes a crater. Another pause, longer this time. They were calculating, reassessing. Good. Let them doubt. In the safe room below, he could hear Titan's soft whine through the intercom. The dog knew something was wrong, knew Jake was in danger. But he stayed with the children, because that's what Jake had ordered. We'll wait, the smooth voice finally said. You can't stay in there forever. Eventually, you'll have to come out. And when you do, we'll be here. Jake smiled grimly. They thought time was on their side. They thought he was trapped. They didn't know he'd been in worse situations. They didn't know he'd learned patience and planning from years of combat. And they definitely didn't know that he'd already started formulating a plan to rescue Dr. Seraphine from that crash set. But first, he needed to make sure the children stayed safe. And that meant keeping these Korvax enforcers focused on him and away from that safe room. Jake settled in behind a reinforced barrier, checked his ammunition, and prepared for a long night. Outside, the storm that had been building finally broke, rain beginning to fall in heavy sheets across the purple grasslands of Viridian 7. In the safe room, Lyra and Nova held each other close, their crystalline skin glowing faintly in the darkness. Titan lay beside them, his warm presence a comfort in the cold underground space. And somewhere in a crashed ship behind the ridge, Dr. Seraphine waited, hoping her desperate gamble had worked, hoping her daughters had found someone who would help them. She had found a human, and that changed everything. The rescue and the new beginning. The daring plan. The daring plan. The rain fell harder now, turning the purple grasslands into a waterlogged maze. Jake watched the tactical display on his security console, tracking the heat signatures of the Korvax enforcers as they established their perimeter. They were good, professional, but they were also predictable. Military training often was. Jake had spent 3 hours reinforcing his position, setting traps and letting the enforcers think he was digging in for a siege. But that had never been his plan. He was buying time, waiting for the right moment. That moment came at 0300 hours during the heaviest part of the storm. Jake descended into the safe room where Lyra, Nova, and Titan waited. The children were huddled together, trying to sleep but failing. Their violet eyes tracked him as he entered. Is it over? Lyra asked hopefully. Not yet, Jake said softly, but I'm going to get your mama now. Titan stays with you. The Doberman whined, clearly wanting to accompany Jake on the mission, but Jake knelt beside his loyal companion, scratching behind his ears. I need you here, boy. Protect them. Understand? Titan leered Jake's hand once, then positioned himself between the children and the entrance. The message was clear. Nothing would get past him. Jake had already prepared his equipment. Night vision goggles, a compact medical kit, climbing rope, and his service pistol. The rifle stayed behind, too cumbersome for what he needed to do. Before leaving, he activated a series of automated responses in his home's defense system. Lights would turn on and off in patterns suggesting movement. Audio recordings would play at intervals. To the enforcers outside, it would appear he was still inside, moving from room to room. The exit he chose was one they wouldn't expect. A drainage tunnel that led from his safe room to a concealed outlet nearly 200 meters away, well beyond their perimeter. Jake had built it years ago, another paranoid precaution that was finally proving its worth. The tunnel was narrow and uncomfortable, but Jake crawled through it with practiced efficiency. When he emerged, the rain immediately soaked him to the bone. Perfect. The storm would mask his heat signature and cover any sound he made. He oriented himself quickly, identifying the ridge where the ship had crashed. The enforcers had left it largely unguarded, focusing their attention on his home, where they believed their targets were hiding. Another tactical error. They should have secured the crash site more thoroughly. Jake moved through the storm like a ghost, using every bit of cover the landscape provided.
The purple grass, normally knee-high, was flattened by the rain. But the crystal formations scattered across the terrain created natural blind spots. 15 minutes later, he reached the crash site, finding Dr. Seraphine. The ship was worse than he'd expected. The elegant transport vessel had torn itself apart on impact, scattering debris across 50 meters. One wing had completely separated, and the main fuselage was crumpled like discarded paper. Jake approached cautiously, aware that the enforcers might have left surveillance equipment. But the storm was interfering with most electronic sensors, and he detected no immediate threats. "Dr. Seraphine," he called softly, moving through the wreckage. "Your daughter sent me. Lyra and Nova, very safe." A weak voice responded from somewhere inside the twisted metal. "Here, I'm here." Jake traced the sound to a partially collapsed section of the ship. Through a gap in the hull, he could see a figure slumped against what remained of the cockpit. Dr. Seraphine was similar in appearance to her daughters. The same crystalline skin and violet eyes, but her features were more mature, more refined. Blood, a strange blue-silver color, stained her silver flight suit.
"Can you move?" Jake asked, assessing the situation. "My leg is trapped," she said, her voice tight with pain. The support beam collapsed during the crash. Jake examined the beam. It was heavy, but not impossibly so. He found a piece of debris that could serve as a lever and positioned it carefully. "This is going to hurt," he warned. "But I need you to pull yourself free when I lift. Can you do that?" Dr. Seraphine nodded, her jaws set with determination. Despite her obvious pain, her eyes were sharp, intelligent. Jake could see why she'd been able to orchestrate this desperate escape. "On 3, Jake said. 1, 2, 3. He threw his weight against the lever. The beam shifted and Dr. Seraphine screamed, but pulled herself free. Jake immediately let the beam drop and moved to her side. "Let me see the leg," he said, his combat medic training taking over. The leg was badly bruised, but not broken, as far as he could tell. He applied a quick pressure bandage and gave her an injection of pain suppressant from his medical kit. "Can you walk?" "With help," she said. "Then we need to move fast. Those enforcers outside my house won't be fooled forever." Dr. Seraphine grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "The data," she said urgently. "I have to get the data core. It's everything. Every experiment, every child they hurt, every law they broke. Without it, this was all for nothing." "Where is it?" She pointed to a sealed compartment near the cockpit. Jake pried it open and found a small crystalline device, no larger than his thumb. Such a small thing to risk so much for. "Got it," he said, securing it in his vest. "Now let's get you out of here." The return under fire. Supporting Dr. Seraphine's weight, Jake began the journey back toward his home. The return trip was slower, more difficult. The scientist was brave, pushing through her pain. But she couldn't move quickly. They were halfway back when Jake's worst fear materialized. A bright spotlight cut through the rain, fixing on them with devastating precision. "Subjects located," a voice shouted. "Southeast quadrant." Jake swore. They must have had drone surveillance active after all, watching for any movement from the crash site. He'd been so focused on avoiding ground-based sensors that he'd missed the aerial coverage. "Run," Jake urged, but Dr. Seraphine stumbled. Energy blasts sizzled through the rain, striking the ground around them. The enforcers were trying for stun shots, wanting their targets alive, but that wouldn't help if they got lucky with a hit. Jake returned fire, his shots more intended to force the enforcers to take cover than to hit anyone. He needed time, just a few more minutes to reach his property line, where his defensive systems could provide cover. More spotlights activated, and Jake realized they're surrounded. The enforcers had repositioned during his rescue mission, anticipating exactly this scenario. They'd used his home as bait while securing the real objective. "We need to surrender," Dr. Seraphine said breathlessly. "You've done enough. I won't let you die for us." "Not happening," Jake growled. He triggered a remote detonator, and a series of explosive charges buried around his property perimeter detonated in sequence. The blasts weren't meant to kill, just to create chaos and cover. Mud and debris flew into the air, and the enforcers' formations broke as they sought cover. Jake used the confusion to drag Dr. Seraphine toward his home. They were close now, so close, just 50 more meters. That's when he heard it. Titan's fierce barking, followed by the sound of his front door splintering. "No," Jake breathed. The children. He'd been outmaneuvered. While he'd been focused on the perimeter, a secondary team had breached his home. They'd used the distraction
of his rescue mission to go after the real targets.
But they hadn't counted on Titan, the transmission. Jake and Dr. Seraphine burst through the back entrance of his home to find chaos. 2 enforcers were on the ground, one clutching a savaged arm, the other unconscious. Titan stood over the safe room entrance, his muzzle bloody, his body positioned protectively over the hatch. The Doberman was magnificent and terrible in his fury. No one was getting past him to those children. "Titan, here," Jake commanded. The dog glanced back but didn't move from his post. His loyalty was divided between his master and his mission to protect the children. The conflict was clear in his eyes. "It's okay, boy," Jake said more gently. "I've got them now. You did good." Titan finally moved, allowing Jake to open the safe room. Lyra and Nova scrambled out, crying, reaching for their mother. "Mama," they screamed in unison. Dr. Seraphine collapsed to her knees, embracing her daughters despite her injured leg. The reunion was brief but intense, all 3 of them crying, their crystalline skin shimmering with emotion. Jake secured the door and checked his security console. More enforcers were regrouping outside. They had minutes at best. "The data core," Jake said. "You said it has everything. Can you transmit it from here?" Dr. Seraphine looked up, tears streaming down her face. "If you have a quantum communication array with military-grade encryption, yes." Jake smiled grimly. "I happen to have exactly that. One of the perks of being former TDF." He led them to his communication room, a shielded space he'd built for emergencies. The equipment was military surplus, powerful enough to punch a signal through jamming and across light years of space. "Where do I send it?" Jake asked. Dr. Seraphine pulled up a list of contacts. "The Galactic Ethics Committee, a Terran Defense Force Judge Advocate General, the Independent News Network, and about 50 other oversight bodies. Send it to everyone. Make it impossible to suppress." Jake loaded the data core and initiated the transmission. The quantum array hummed to life, encoding and broadcasting the damning evidence across the galaxy. Outside, the enforcers realized what was happening. They began a coordinated assault on the house, no longer concerned with avoiding damage. "Upload at 60%, Jake reported, watching the progress bar. An explosion rocked the house. The enforcers were using breaching charges now, desperate to stop the transmission. 80%. Titan barked a warning. The front wall was beginning to buckle under sustained fire. 95%. Jake, Dr. Seraphine said quietly, "Thank you. Whatever happens now, thank you." "Upload complete," Jake announced. The quantum array confirmed successful transmission to all designated recipients. Somewhere in the galaxy, powerful people were receiving evidence they couldn't ignore. The Korvax Syndicate's dark secrets were now public knowledge. As if in response, the assault on the house suddenly ceased. Jake checked the external cameras and saw the enforcers retreating to their transport vessels. They were abandoning the mission. "What's happening?" Lyra asked. Jake smiled. "Your mama just changed the galaxy, sweetheart. The Korvax can't whiz witnesses now. Every enforcer here just became a liability." Sure enough, the transport vessels lifted off, disappearing into the stormy night. They'd leave no evidence of their presence, no trail that could be traced back to the Syndicate. A family forged in crisis. Dawn broke over Viridian 7 with unusual clarity, the storm having passed during the night. Jake sat on his porch, Titan sprawled at his feet, watching the twin suns rise. Inside his home, now somewhat worse for wear, Dr. Seraphine was tending to her daughters. The children's laughter drifted through the open door, a sound that Jake realized he'd been missing from his life. Dr. Seraphine emerged, her leg properly bandaged now, and sat beside him. "I've received confirmation from the Galactic Ethics Committee," she said. "They're launching a full investigation into the Korvax Syndicate. Based on the evidence I provided, multiple arrest warrants have been issued. The cognitive enhancement program has been shut down, and the children they held are being released to proper care facilities." "That's good," Jake said. "They've also granted my daughters and me asylum status. We can go anywhere in the galaxy now." She paused. "Anywhere we want." Jake felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. Of course they would leave. They had their freedom now. They could build a life anywhere, somewhere safer, somewhere less isolated. "Where will you go?" he asked. Dr. Seraphine was quiet for a long moment. "The girls and I were talking. We've never had a real home before. Just laboratories and hips and hiding places." She looked at him with those remarkable violet eyes. "We were wondering if maybe we could stay here with you, if you have us." Jake turned to her, surprised. "Here, on Viridian 7? It's isolated.
There's not much civilization, just me and Titan and a lot of purple grass. Exactly, she said softly. It's peaceful, it's safe, and it's the first place where anyone ever fought for us without wanting something in return. Her hand found his. The first place it felt like home. Inside, Lyra and Nova appeared at the door. Can we, Jake? Can we stay, please? Titan's tail thumped against the porch, his own vote clearly cast. Jake looked at the scientist who'd risked everything for her children, at the two brave girls who'd run through a storm to find help, and at his faithful dog who'd defended them all without hesitation. Somewhere along the way, in the chaos and danger, something had shifted. His solitary existence had transformed into something richer, warmer, more meaningful. Yeah, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Yeah, you can stay. The children squealed with joy, rushing forward to hug him. Dr. Seraphine smiled, her crystalline skin shimmering in the morning light. Titan barked once, happy and content. In the weeks that followed, Jake's home transformed. Dr. Seraphine set up a small laboratory where she could continue her research, this time focused on healing rather than enhancement. The twins explored the purple grasslands with Titan and their constant guardian, their laughter echoing across the frontier. Jake taught them about human customs, about engineering, about the simple pleasures of fixing things instead of running from them. In return, they taught him about their species, their culture, and the importance of family, whether biological or chosen.
Sometimes, at night, they would all sit together on the porch, watching the stars. Dr. Seraphine would lean against Jake's shoulder, comfortable in a way that suggested their relationship was evolving into something more than just allies. The twins would play with Titan, their crystalline skin glowing softly in the darkness. "Do you ever regret it?" Dr. Seraphine asked one evening. "Taking us in? Your quiet life is gone." Jake looked at the family he'd found, at the children who now called him Uncle Jake, at the woman beside him who made his home feel alive again, and at Titan who'd found new purpose in protecting those smaller than himself. "No," he said honestly, "I don't regret it at all. Because sometimes the best things in life aren't the ones you plan for. Sometimes they crash land in your vegetable garden during a storm. Two frightened children whispering about their mama still on the ship, and a loyal dog who knows instinctively that some causes are worth fighting for. Sometimes family isn't about blood or species or origin. Sometimes it's about who stands with you when darkness falls, who trusts you with their most precious treasures, and who chooses to build a future together on a frontier world where the grass grows purple and the sunsets paint the sky in colors that exist nowhere else in the galaxy." Jake Morrison had left war behind to find peace. Instead, he'd found something better: purpose, connection, and love in the most unexpected forms. And Titan, the faithful Doberman who'd blocked his path that fateful night, now spent his days protecting two crystalline children who'd become his pack, his family, his reason for being. On Viridian 7, under twin suns and purple skies, a new family thrived. Human, alien, and canine, bound together not by circumstance, but by choice. And in the quiet moments, when the children were asleep and the stars shone bright, Jake and Seraphine would talk about the future, about possibilities, about the children they were raising together and the life they were building. It wasn't the life Jake had planned. It was better. And somewhere in the galaxy, the Korvax Syndicate fell, its crimes exposed, its victims freed. All because the mother loved her children enough to risk everything, and a retired soldier and his dog decided that some battles were still worth fighting. The story of Our Mama's Still on the Ship became legend in certain circles, a tale of courage, loyalty, and the unexpected bonds that can form when different species choose to trust each other. A reminder that sometimes the most human thing you can do is protect those who cannot protect themselves, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. And on Viridian 7, life went on, richer and fuller than before. Proof that even in the vastness of space, home isn't a place. It's the people and the beings you choose to stand beside.